All right. Can I have you state your full name for the record and spell your last name, please?
My name is Marilyn Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N.
And Ms. Bryan, were you in the room earlier when I went through the penalties for perjury?
Yes, I was.
And do you understand what perjury is?
Yes, I do.
And being advised of the potential penalties for perjury, do you promise to tell the truth in this case today?
I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jordy.
All right. Good morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, don't be nervous. Ma'am, you are an owner of an entity that is potentially directly affected by this hazardous pipeline, is that correct?
I am.
And what's the name of that entity?
N8N2E Properties LLP.
And the partners of that entity, is it fair it's you and your family members?
Yes, there are 7 partners in our
Okay. And some of the other partners are here today, and they'll offer testimony on a few different aspects.
My sister, my brother-in-law, and my niece.
So just to kind of set the stage of where the property is, I understand you've prepared an exhibit here that I'd like to have marked and passed around.
I did.
All right. And Your Honor, would this then be MB1? Is that okay?
That's what I would propose.
All right. So we'll just pass that around, ma'am. Thank you. And do you have a copy in front of you there?
I do.
All right. And so just to set the stage, as I said, can you help the commissioners understand specifically where the property in question that we're going to talk about is located?
Okay, on your map, at the very bottom center, is the property that I'm going to speak about today.
And what's the general size of that property?
It is 504 acres, partly cropland, partly pasture.
And approximately, is that a little north of the city limits of Bismarck?
Yes, it's northeast of Bismarck. It's approximately 5 miles from Costco.
Okay, very good. Now, tell me a little bit and give some context to the commission, please, about the history of this ground and its importance.
Okay, my testimony here today is, to me, it is this property is a love story. And this love story dates back to 1914, when my father, Robert Morse, was born to William and Anna Morse. And they lived on what was called the home place, which is currently North 26th Street. And if you refer to the map, the heart with the blue around this property, that was where my father was born. In 1918, just 4 years later, my mother, Marion Schonert, was born 3 miles from my father, and that circle heart is noted with pink around it. They grew up as neighbors, friends, classmates. They both attended Arnold School, which is a one-room schoolhouse that my brothers and sister also attended later on. They dated, they fell in love, and they got married. And after my parents were married, they lived in Bismarck for a short time, where my father drove Bismarck City Bus and was the first delivery person for Sears and Roebuck. But my parents had a dream that one day they wanted to own and operate their own farm and ranch and raise their family in the country. So for 3 years in a row, in the late 1940s, my father, my mother, my 2 brothers, and me, we did custom combining, and we drove from North Dakota down to South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, only a few short miles from the Texas border. So my mother and father could save the money that they made from custom combining to buy that dream home, that dream farm, north of Bismarck. That was in 1950, and they were fortunate enough to have the cash to pay for that farm. and they lived on that dream farm until 1976, and that's when they retired. But they loved that land so much that they couldn't leave it. They wanted to stay there. And so they built a house right on the corner on top of a hill so they could be in the country but see the Bismarck city lights. And they lived there for another 21 years until they moved to Bismarck after the severe winter of the 1996-1997, similar to our winter we just experienced. So what does this land mean to me? This land means everything to me. It was a gift. It was the most precious thing that we have ever owned. The partners of 8 and 2E feel a grave responsibility to preserve and protect this land and use this land for what it was intended, for agriculture. And I say agriculture because there's this theory or argument out there somewhere that if you're against the pipeline, then you're also against coal, and you're against natural gas, and you're against lignite and other energy sources. And agriculture was one of them. We are the face of agriculture. We are agriculture. We grow the crops, we raise the cattle, we feed everyone here. Our tables are full of what we do out there. So we know that the future growth of Bismarck is headed that way. We accept that. But on the other hand, we have promised our parents that we would take good care of this land. We will do whatever we have to save it. And by having a pipeline on this property, this would ruin our dreams and those dreams of our children and our grandchildren. We want to do great things with this land, and a pipeline is not great.
If I could just interrupt, I understand your other owners are going to talk a little bit more about the development.
Yes, they are.
But if you could just give a preview of, given Bismarck's expansion, your direction, what generally the intent is, and we'll go into more detail with your...
Okay, sure, fine, thank you. So our family has a strong history of developing property for residential purposes. I have 3 uncles, this is my dad's brothers, who have done just that in the past. My uncle Virgil Morse developed the Grand Prairie Estates on 43rd Avenue. My uncle Billy Morse and uncle Leonard Morse developed Shamrock Acres and the 4 Ks on 26th Street. The 4 Ks was the first subdivision in Bismarck area, dating back to the 1970s, and it was named after my uncle's grandchildren, Kelly, Kristen, Carrie, and Kent. We want to be able to decide for ourselves what is the best future of this land. And as far as the development, like Mr. Jardy said, that will be covered later. But if we should develop this land, it would be like no other. At this point, our thoughts and our preliminary plans are for 40 plats at 10 acres each, with green space, meadows, a place for a windmill, horse riding paths, etc. It would be the country living at its very best. We are very excited about this possibility. So, in summary, what are the negatives I have to having a pipeline on this property? Just to name a few: that the proposed pipeline serves no public good, Our beloved state of North Dakota should not be used as a dumping ground for the hazardous toxic waste. And without a doubt, this proposed pipeline would devaluate the property. And what insurance company would insure the property against the damages of a leak or rupture? And I refer to the letter from our insurance company saying that this is we have a pollutant exclusion in our liability policy. Who is going to insure us?
And ma'am, let me just stop you there. We're passing out what's been marked as MB2, which is a copy of that letter. Let me just ask you a few questions about that if I can. So due to your concern about potential liability and risk, should this pipeline be forced upon you against your will, you reached out to your insurance company to get opinions of whether or not there would be liability coverage for you in certain circumstances. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and I don't know if you're aware, if you were listening to a prior hearing, but an easement agreement, a proposed easement agreement is in the record, and there's something in that that's called an indemnification clause. Are you aware that Summit claims to indemnify landowners in certain circumstances, but not if the landowner or any of its tenants or invitees, if there's a claim that you did something wrong? Do you understand? Then Summit does not hold you harmless.
I understand that.
And because of that, you then went to get an opinion from the insurance company that you pay annual premiums to see if you could essentially pay to protect yourselves from their risk to you, correct?
Correct.
And the ultimate opinion is that there would be no liability coverage and they wouldn't even provide the defense of a lawyer to you.
That's correct.
And then you would be out in the cold on your own to fund out of pocket any claim or allegation if that you, a tenant, a farm tenant, did anything that led to a leak, rupture, or spill.
That's correct.
Madam Examiner, I know this isn't a jury trial and we're very loose with the rules of evidence, but I think the leading is getting a little bit more than we probably should have, even in this type of hearing.
We can slow it down as you want to, real down. I mean, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'd ask that you please ask more open-ended questions.
Okay. So did we kind of cover your concerns about the lack of coverage, or do you want to expand on the fact that you'd have no coverage under certain instances of you being alleged to take some action that led to a release or spill?
I am not aware that there will be any other recourse to take.
And do you know if there's even a policy or a rider or additional coverage you could even purchase if you theoretically could afford that?
Same objection.
You can answer. Your objection's noted.
I do not know where we will obtain insurance coverage.
And did your insurance company offer you, well, your current policy doesn't have coverage, but I can sell you this, or did they just say no option?
He said he would look into it to see if possibly there might be some other insurance that would cover.
But you haven't heard from him, and that conversation was in early April.
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'm afraid that we would not be able to afford another insurance company to cover our property.
So do you have opinion then on whether or not, if this proposed hazardous pipeline was located on your land, if that would have more than minimal negative impacts on yourself, your family, and the land itself?
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes. Do you have an opinion of whether or not, should the commission approve this pipeline, which would cut right through your ground, correct?
Yes, diagonally.
Yes. Do you have an opinion on whether or not that is a negative impact to you and the land?
It is most definitely negative.
And what about, is it a negative economic impact?
It is a negative economic impact because it affects all 7 of the current descendants of this property, and as my sister will elaborate on that, there are 29 descendants that it will affect eventually.
And do you have an opinion on whether or not it's an efficient use of the land resources of prime residential development land in Greater Bismarck to bisect that land with a hazardous CO2 pipeline?
It is of no benefit.
And you said you can't think of any reason how this pipeline would serve the public use or public good?
No, I cannot.
Have you heard any reasons why it would? Any good arguments?
No, I have not.
Ma'am, is there anything else you'd like to expand on here today about the property or concerns?
No, other than I guess I would just like to ask the commission to think about this decision very seriously. I know you have already, but ask yourselves, would you want this pipeline in your backyard? And I'd also like to just thank you for listening to us today. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Jordy, did you want to mark this insurance letter as MB2?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I said that I'd like to mark that, and then I'll, of course, offer both MB1 and MB2.
Okay. First off, Mr. Bender, any objection to the exhibits? And do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a few. Ma'am, I apologize. Maybe you covered this, but I just want to make sure that I understand. You have 3 hearts on this exhibit.
Yes.
Does 8N2E Properties own the property in yellow under the red heart?
No.
Okay.
It was my mother's original.
But you no longer own that, is that correct?
We do not, no. We own where the green heart is in the center of the bottom.
Okay, Section 24, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then this particular exhibit, it depicts the proposed location of the pipeline, is that right?
Yes, the pipeline goes
I'm sorry?
diagonally across our property.
But I thought you said you didn't own any property in the red heart.
The red heart is owned by another family.
But you said the pipe goes diagonally through that area?
The pipeline goes diagonally through the green heart.
Okay, you don't have that on this map.
Yes, it is on the map.
Okay, yeah, I guess you didn't understand my question. The pipeline isn't depicted on this map.
No, the pipeline is not depicted on the map. No, sorry.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Pelham, any objection to the exhibits?
No objection. I have a couple of questions for you, ma'am.
Go ahead.
As to communication with the company, have you had any communication with the company yourself?
Not directly, other than the fact that we did invite them to sit down with us. This was back in September, just to let them know how we feel about our land and how we didn't want anyone on our land to survey.
What was their response to that?
They asked us, was there any other place around our land that would be more desirable to put this pipeline? And we said we didn't want to name that because that's like putting somebody else in the same position we are in right now. We weren't going to do that. That was their job.
As far as any potential reroutes on property owned by the LLP, was that discussed ever?
With them?
Right.
No, not really. No.
And safe to say no easement has been executed by the LLP?
No, there's been no easement.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions for you.
Mr. Pranis, do you have any objection to the exhibits?
Your Honor.
And do you have any questions?
Your Honor.
Mr. Baki, any objection to the exhibits?
No, Your Honor.
All right, MB1 and MB2 will be admitted. Do you have any questions for Ms. Bryant, Mr. Baki?
Just a few. Turning to this exhibit, Ms. Bryan, MB2, this is a letter dated April 10, 2023 that you received from your insurance agent from Northern States Insurance Services, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And they tell you that CO2 transported in the Summit pipeline would be considered a pollutant, correct?
That's correct.
But they go on to tell you that other gases or things that have a beneficial use on your property are not considered under your insurance policy to be a pollutant, correct?
That's correct.
So things that you would use on your property, oil, natural gas, agricultural chemicals, those types of things would be covered under your policy with Northern States in the event there was some loss or catastrophic event.
Yes.
And so do you understand this indemnity provision means that if somebody else, let's say you had somebody on your property working, caused the pipeline and it's on your property to leak, that potentially you could get sued and you'd have no attorney hired for you to defend you against a lawsuit or claim and no coverage whatsoever?
That's true.
And if we had a leak in the pipeline, and God forbid it went to neighboring properties and someone got seriously injured or died, everything you've worked for your whole life would be at risk, correct?
That is correct.
And that's what Summit's telling you, is they'll only cover if they cause the damage or cause the leak, correct?
Yes.
That doesn't give you any reassurance, does it?
It does not.
And your agent, Mr. West from Northern States, also tells you that not only do they not provide an attorney to defend you if there's an event with this pipeline, but they also tell you they don't even have coverage available because he says there's no endorsement or rider that would provide this type of liability coverage.
That is correct.
So you can't even go out and buy insurance to protect you if it goes on your land. Summit's telling you you should take all the risk. Your family should risk bankruptcy, losing everything, so they can put the pipeline on your property.
That's correct.
And were you aware that yesterday Summit submitted a letter from Farmers Union, and that's W-173, and even the insurance agent or claims officer they consulted from Farmers Union Insurance says this means that there may be no coverage from your policy in event there is a release of pollutants, meaning CO2.
I do understand that.
Okay. So they've determined the same thing that your agent's telling you, is there's not going to be any coverage in the events of a release of CO2 from that pipeline.
Correct.
Now, you understand that lawyers, being like they are, sometimes they start lawsuits and claims where the parties ultimately determine not to be at fault in any way, correct?
Yes, I am.
And so even if you did absolutely nothing wrong, you could be drug into a lawsuit that could drag on for years and have to incur expensive attorney's fees to fight that lawsuit.
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Commissioner Chrisman?
I think I understood your points. I just want to make sure my notes are correct. 8N2E properties, that's number 8, N as in Nancy, number 2, E as in Echo?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you for reading.
It actually stands for 8 miles north and 2 miles east. But that was before the growth of Bismarck has gone way beyond.
Now you gave away your code.
It's like 4 miles now instead of 8.
Commissioner Haugen-Hoffert?
Yes, I have a couple questions. So for clarification, in September, you did sit down with Summit and have communication?
Yes, we asked them to come and visit with us.
And during that time, what was discussed? You didn't want to sign the easement? Or
We just told them what the land meant to us.
Okay. So you offered no reroute to them because you indicated that it's the company's job. What further communication have you had with Summit since that meeting in September?
I will have to say none, other than we were sued. That was actually before our meeting with them. We were sued for not voluntarily giving permission for the survey.
So that's been your last communication, correspondence with them?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Dawson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Any redirect, Mr. Jordy?
Yes, just a moment. Ma'am, has Summit since offered you any alternatives or suggestions? They listened to your concerns, and have they, come back with anything in terms of a newer, better plan?
No.
Do you think that it's unwise for the current route, not only through your property, but through greater Bismarck that's proposed? And do you believe it would be more wise, if they're going to do this at all, to go on the southern side of Bismarck?
Yes, I would definitely prefer that.
And are you aware that Summit has claimed, well, shucks, we can't do that because it would take allegedly 2 more years to review that possibility? Are you aware of that?
I am.
And do you think that should be on you, that the fact that they might have to spend a little more money to have the privilege of this hazardous pipeline across all of North Dakota, that's just part of their business decision to locate in the first place?
I don't know why. I don't know why they want to do what they want to do, but I don't think that they're looking at the landowners' rights. And we, as of this great state of North Dakota, are having to give up our own land that we love. They're not looking at that.
Do you think it's fair, when balancing the equities and the considerations of this commission relative to net impacts, that a single ethanol plant should be able to profit off sequestering carbon dioxide at the expense of 300 plus miles of North Dakota land?
No, I think we're using North Dakota as a dump ground. And I think every state that is involved with this pipeline should take care of their own. Why should it all come up here and be dumped in our precious ground?
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Bender, any additional questions?
Just a couple of questions. Ma'am, I think in response to your counsel's question, you indicated that you haven't received any recent contact from Summit about rerouting the pipeline. Is that a fair statement of your testimony?
Not personally, not.
And do you know your counsel contacted Summit and said we were to have no contact with you? Are you aware of the fact that your counsel contacted me and said we are to have no contact with his clients?
No, I'm not aware
Do
of
you think we should have contacted you even though your counsel instructed us not to contact you?
I'm not aware that my counsel contacted you.
Well, what do you think? Do you think if your counsel did contact us and tell us not to have contact with you, should we have still contacted you?
Subjection, it's irrelevant, hypothetical.
She can answer it.
I've already answered.
Pardon me?
I've already answered.
What was your answer?
I am not aware of the fact that my counsel contacted.
I'm saying if your counsel did contact Summit and indicate that we should not have any contact with you, do you think Summit should still have contacted you? Pardon me?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, I have to have a follow-up on that. And that's why we need Jimmy Powell to come out of the room where he's hiding in and come here and testify, because you know my email, you know my number, and no one's contacted me.
Okay, we're taking testimony. I asked the attorneys not to engage each other in this back and forth. I don't think that's a productive use of our time today. Mr. Pelham, any questions?
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Pranis, any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Bakke?
No, Your Honor.
Any other commissioner questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Bryan.
Thank you.